Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Boob Talk with your host, Cynthia Rogers. It's Season 3. Come and join the Boob Talk family as we discuss the issues breast cancer and other cancer survivors face. Come along on our journey. We are survivors.
Good evening. Welcome to Boob Talk. I'm your host, Cynthia Rogers. Thank you for joining me this evening, and thank you for joining me as we kick off the new year with Survivor Spotlight. And our Survivor Spotlight guest for tonight is Tracy Stewart, breast cancer survivor and owner of Going Flat Fashion. It's time for Survivor Spotlight, shining the light on the courage, hope, and faith of a survivor's journey. Tracy, welcome to Boob Talk.
Hi, Cynthia. Thanks for having me.
So glad to have you here with us and to kick off our first show of 2022. So, Tracy, I just wanted to ask you, you have an interesting name for your company. What is Going Flat Fashion?
So I started Going Flat Fashions in 2019. It seems like forever ago now.
Right.
I started it right before COVID, and what the seed of the idea was is that I'm a breast cancer survivor, and I have been out of treatment since 2009 or 2010. And I went through this whole journey where I had implants and then eventually had my implants removed and I went flat, as they say. And so I wanted to provide an outlet for women who have gone flat, such as I did, or who are presenting flat, or who went straight to flat, or women who are unilaterally flat as well, to find fashion and also to have somebody that could find them fashion if they didn't want to go shopping. So Going Flat Fashions provides clothing as well as personal shopping services for women who are survivors, who are looking for a way to inexpensively revamp their wardrobe, because I only sell secondhand. I have a huge love of vintage and secondhand clothing, and so it's kind of a way for me to combine my cancer experience and my love of fashion and vintage. And so it just sort of evolved from that. And I do have customers who are not survivors. I have customers who come from all walks of life and all different experiences. And my customers who are not survivors are there to kind of support my project, because I offer the styling services that I do for women who are post-mastectomy or who have opted to have a mastectomy. I offer those at no charge. So it's sort of a mishmash of things, but it's a way for me to serve my community and help women who, sometimes when you are post-surgery, you have to do a big revamp. Not always, but some people have to do a big revamp of their wardrobe because their body changes quite a lot from the time that they're diagnosed to the time that they are out of treatment, etc. And so I wanted to provide an economical and sort of fun way for people to kind of feel better because I feel like there is some therapeutic value to feeling good and having fun with fashion. So
definitely.
That's it in a nutshell. And then I also do some advocacy and education around just issues of reconstruction and advocate for awareness around flat closure and that sort of thing.
So did you want to speak about that? I know you just mentioned that you had implants, but you had them removed. So do you want to just share with us what was that experience for you? And, how did you even find out that you had breast cancer?
Yeah, so I found out that I had breast cancer when I was 36. So that was in 2007.
That's really young.
I was quite young. my primary care physician, who had been my physician for a very long time, when I went to her and I was concerned about the lump that I had in my breast, she kind of dismissed me a little bit. She said, well, you're too young to have breast cancer. You have fibrocystic breasts. I wouldn't really worry about it. And she wouldn't actually send me for a mammogram. So I took it upon myself to go to the Women's Health walk-in clinic in the city that I lived in, and I saw a doctor. He was actually a surgeon, a general surgeon, who was on call that day. And he did an examination, and he was quite concerned because he did find the lump. And then he also found some lumps under my arm as well. And so he immediately sent me for a biopsy, and, it was positive. And then my doctor, my primary doctor, phoned me and apologized very profusely about kind of dismissing me, but I wasn't really accepting her apology very well at that time.
I don't think I would have either.
No, it was a kind of not. It was a little negligent, I think, of her.
Yeah,
and I was very, very angry. And I remember standing in the Safeway just yelling at her. Because
Good for
she had
you.
called me, and I had my BlackBerry at the time. It was 2007, so I'm on my BlackBerry, and I'm yelling at her like, you don't know what, I said, you're an idiot, you misdiagnosed me, and now how do you feel? And I hope you feel guilty for this for the rest of your life, which was kind of, I was very mean, but I just really felt dismissed. And so my cancer was stage 2B, and it was ER positive. My tumor was 5.5 centimeters, and I had nodal involvement. So they did a single mastectomy, and then they removed 26 nodes from under my arm. And so I think I have 2 or 3 left. And after I had my surgery, then I had 4 months of chemotherapy, which I started on Valentine's Day. Oh. And I actually had my surgery just around Christmas, so
what's with the holidays, Tracy?
Holidays. And then I had radiation, which I started on my mom's birthday, or I finished on my mom's birthday. So I can remember the dates really well because they were all sort of these days that I mark every year. And so after I had my single mastectomy, the options that were given to me were either reconstruction with my own tissue, which they said wouldn't really work very well because I didn't have enough tissue to do it. They said the result wouldn't be great. So the only option for me was implants. And they didn't, they talked to me about the, having the implants and the radiation kind of potentially causing a problem with the implant on the right side because I had radiation on my right side. And the idea of going flat was kind of mentioned in passing as, well, you could do nothing, but most people don't do that. And so I made a decision to have the implants, and in just sort of the crazy PTSD of having cancer, I made this decision that I normally wouldn't have made in any other circumstance. Like I don't think that in my life, if I hadn't had cancer, I ever would have thought about having implants. It just wasn't on my radar as like something that I would ever do, right? Mm-hmm. And so I really feel like the option of me not having reconstruction or having flat closure reconstruction was never really presented in a proper way. And so I went through with the implants because that's what you do. And I had them for 5 years, and they caused me a lot of pain. I never had any capsular contracture. I didn't have any resulting cancers from having the implants. I didn't have my implants moving around in a really strange way like some people do. I just really felt always, I told the plastic surgeon that it felt like I had a piece of glass in my eye. It was just like that kind of, that just kind of gnawing pain. It's the only way that I can describe it, this kind of constant pain. And I was playing a sport, as I mentioned in sort of a pre-interview, I used to play roller derby, and it was really interfering with my ability to move my body properly. And when I, after I had because I played all through my surgery and treatment, and after I had my first surgery, like just the single mastectomy, I didn't have any mobility problems. I didn't have any pain really. It was just, my recovery from that was really, really easy, relatively speaking. And I was back playing in a couple of weeks, and I felt really, really good. And so after I had the implants was when my health kind of started to take a dive a little bit, in that I had mobility issues. I couldn't, I had a lot of inflammation and just a lot of pain, and I still do, but it's quite a bit less than it was. So I went to my plastic surgeon, and he removed my implants. I had a prophylactic mastectomy, so I went completely flat after that, and so that was in 2014, and it was kind of the best decision I ever made. I wish in so many ways that I had not opted for the implants, and so my advocacy work kind of revolves around just the awareness that this is an option, and also the awareness that there are lots of women that do opt for going flat that are very, very happy and healthy and do well in that, with that decision. Because I think, still it's presented as, well, you're going to be unhappy if you don't get reconstruction. Yeah. And I perfectly appreciate everybody's right to choose what they want to do with their bodies. That isn't even a thing that would cross my mind to say, well, no, don't do it. But I think that the information is not, you go to breast reconstruction awareness events and it's never even talked about. And so I think that is a huge gap in education and knowledge for women. And I went to this year's Bra Day event that was presented by the Women's College Hospital. It was a virtual event. Women's College Hospital is in Toronto. I live in Canada. And they didn't have flat closure as part of the main panels about reconstruction. And it was only part of one breakout group. So, and this is the third event I've been to where, they talk about how they're going to include it, and then they don't include it. So I started a petition this year, and I think I have close to 800 signatures now. And this is right after the Bra Day event in October. And once I get to 1,000 signatures, I'm going to send it to them. I have written a letter to them as well, just saying this is unacceptable. Once again, you promised to provide this educational piece, and yet you're still not there. And, there have been a few of us here in Canada that have kind of been pushing them to do it. And it's just still, because the event is sponsored by Allergan and the implant companies, they don't want to talk about it, so there's a lot there.
Yeah.
So that's where the advocacy piece comes in to the business. And it's sort of it's not the biggest part, but it is definitely a part of what I'm trying to do in the world.
Well, I commend you for doing that and for having the courage to speak out about that, because it is something that you don't really hear much about. You don't really hear. I mean, first of all, there's just the overall stigma of having breast cancer in general, to make us feel that we should be ashamed or embarrassed. But then on top of that, if you choose to go flat, that then, somehow something is wrong with you, you're less of a woman. So I just want to thank you for having the voice to speak for those that are maybe going through a situation where they are deciding, should they go flat or not. And, you just speaking out, and hopefully if someone is listening, you are giving them the courage to do so, just as you did. And I wanted to ask you, when you said you went to your surgeon, now what was your surgeon's reaction when you said, hey, I want these taken out? Was your surgeon receptive, or were they trying to say maybe you should keep them in, or how was that reaction?
Yeah, my surgeon, he's great. My oncologist was great. My surgeon understood. He kind of asked me 3 or 4 times, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? But he wasn't resistant. I think the reason that he asked me so many times if I was sure is that he really did just want me to be sure, because, every time you go for surgery, there's a risk with that.
Yes.
My surgeon was a very skilled surgeon. And at the time, I didn't even really know to ask him for a flat closure, aesthetic flat closure. Like, I just said, I want my implants out. And, moving on in time and seeing the way that other women, when they ask for that surgery, the way that they can sometimes be left either with like a skin sparing or just kind of slapped together closed. It's terrifying what I've seen, I'm part of a lot of different discussion groups on social media, like private groups on Facebook, where I see the results of surgeries where somebody, wanted a good flat closure and they didn't get a good flat closure because either the surgeon didn't know how, or there was some denial there in that, oh, well, you'll decide on implants later, so we're just going to give you a skin sparing mastectomy where, there's still skin involved and it doesn't look good. And I do think as well that that's one of the reasons that some women who do opt for flat closure are so unhappy with it, is because they don't get the right result.
Okay.
And so part of the education piece as well is showing a good aesthetic flat closure that looks nice, where there's not skin hanging, where there's not where it's been done so that you get a good visual result, right? I think that's part of it. And so I didn't know any of that in 2010, or when did I get them removed? 2014. I didn't know any of that. And fortunately, I had a surgeon who was a very skilled microsurgeon and who was a good plastic surgeon and did it properly, and I got a good result. And so, that's another, if there's people out there that are thinking about that option and it is a reconstruction option, because you do need to be able to get a good result. And if you don't have a picture to show somebody, I think that's important, is that there's this awareness around, what a good flat closure is and what an unacceptable result is. So my surgeon, he wasn't resistant, he was supportive, and he gave me a good result. And it was just the way that the stars lined up, because it could have been very different from what I've heard, because I do meet a lot of women through my work with going flat, and I meet a lot of women who have not had the same result as I have, and who, are somewhat, it's trauma, because there's so much import that's placed on this body part for whatever reason.
Yeah.
There's pressure not only from, there's pressure on yourself to make the right decision, but then you get pressure sometimes from your partner, your intimate partner, because that I've heard, and it's sad, but it's true that sometimes an intimate partner doesn't accept that idea. There's pressure from your doctors and your surgeons, depending on where you're having your treatment and how open that hospital care team or whoever is to a different path, let's say, because I think, for so long the path was, reconstruction or no choice at all, right? And I think it's come very far since I was diagnosed in 2007, but I still don't think that it's far enough, in that there's not an equitable representation of flat closure. Still, it's kind of the or you could. It's not placed at the forefront along with the other kinds of surgeries that are available to you.
I agree. Yes, you really don't hear much talk about it, and I think it's also just society in general saying, "Hey, you need to have boobs," So I feel, and probably also as far as these companies, if they're probably, pressuring physicians or what have you to encourage women to get implants because it's, I'm sure, a big money maker. So I'm sure that also factors into it as well. So I wanted to ask you, we're talking about how, this can become a trauma. Now, how did you feel emotionally and just psychologically, once you did have them removed?
Oh, after I had them removed and I had the result that I did, I was so relieved. It was, I don't think I was never super attached to my breasts anyway. They were never very big. They were sort of I was sort of more attached to my butt than my breasts, so that would be, so it was never a thing for me, right? It was never a defining part of my body, really. And because I was in so much pain with the implants, I really felt psychologically relieved about having them out.
That's good.
And I know not everybody. That's not how everybody feels. Like, there's definitely a lot of emotion around that. But I also think that, if you have a good result and that you're able to live a pain-free and healthy existence, it's much more important than any body part.
Yeah.
And so, if that's what you have to do to be healthy, or that's what you choose to do to be healthy, and then that decision should be on you, I mean, that and people should support that. It's not always the way. So, and what you talk about with the stigma, I mean, there is stigma around cancer. There's so much silence around it, so much denial around it. And it becomes, and because it's women's health care, we are by default sort of second class citizens in a way in the scheme of healthcare. And there's many studies to support what I'm saying. It's not just my my opinion, but there are many studies to support that women's healthcare and is lesser than. And then if you're a woman of color, or you're in, a woman with barriers, it's even more pronounced.
Yes.
And so, and I mean, one thing about breast cancer is that the research is really well funded, but, there's also there's a lot of barriers to access to information. And you are right in that the implant companies are, they're paying lots of money for marketing and access to doctors. And in fact, I read a study here that in Canada that they now, if a woman is going through breast cancer, her doctor has to offer her the option of implants, whereas before it was sort of like, it wasn't a requirement. But now the medical association is like, no, you have to offer.
Really?
Yeah. And so this is like something that, they were saying, well, it's because women in rural locations, because Canada's such a big country and we have a lot of rural area, women in rural locations aren't getting implants because they don't have access to information. So we need to give them that. It's all under the guise of information. So what do you do? This could be a very long conversation. I could just talk and talk and talk all day.
Right.
It could be a very long conversation. But, and in the U.S., the statistics are is that a lot more women get implants after breast cancer than in Canada. And so, there was a gap that they saw in Canada where, probably the companies that make the implants were like, how can we fix this? And so, that was part of their strategy to kind of try and spread the word a little bit more, because our reconstruction rates are markedly lower than yours in the U.S. And part of that is just because we have such a rural population. So.
Yeah, I never knew that. You are bringing just so much awareness to things that I never even knew.
Yeah, it's the two countries are very different just because of the way our healthcare works, and because of our population. I mean, we have 40 million people or 50 million people compared to however hundreds of millions you have in the U.S., right? So
yes, that is true. So I then wanted to ask you, for those women that are now listening to this and thinking about, hey, maybe I can go flat. What advice would you give them as far as your experience, and also, just even how to approach their physician to even just start up a conversation if they're feeling like maybe they don't even have a right to bring it up?
Well, I think there's resources, and I think the one thing, to arm oneself against your physicians, which shouldn't be really a thing that you have to do, but I think that
sometimes you have to.
Sometimes you have to, and especially I think nowadays with the way that the healthcare system is, and just the stress that's put on, everyone in relation to what's going on in healthcare and the world and everything else. But I think that, being your own advocate is really important, and don't be afraid to bring it up. And there are resources out there. There's two very good resources. They're both U.S. resources. One of them is called Not Putting on a Shirt, and it's notputtingonashirt.org. And there's lots of resources about aesthetic flat closure. There's photos there about, what a good result looks like. There's information about how to talk to your doctor. There's information from other women who have gone flat. And then there's also another resource called Flat Closure Now, which is another not-for-profit in the U.S., and they do a similar kind of advocacy and information, or advocacy work, and provide information. There's also a lot of groups on Facebook, which is where a lot of women that I know have found support for just talking to other people who have either gone straight to flat or have gone, from implants to flat. If you hashtag going flat on Instagram, you'll find lots and lots of us out there. And so I think part of it is just talking to other people who have made the decision. And then part of it is bringing those resources to your physicians to let them know what it is that you want. And then if you have a physician that is saying, well, no, I can't do that, or no, don't do that, it's always important to get a second opinion, because somebody else might say something different. And in my experience with my diagnosis even, is that I had a doctor who said to me, oh, well, you're too young to have cancer. If I hadn't had that second opinion, I probably wouldn't be here.
No.
So it's your body, it's your life, it's your result, right? And so I guess don't let them bully you into something that you don't want, or take. And I think the other thing too, and I wish that I had done this, is that take some time to make the decisions that you need to make, because sometimes, as you know, always, I think, after you've gone through a diagnosis and then treatment and then all of that stuff that goes along with it, all of the physical manifestations of chemotherapy and surgery and all of that, I mean, you're quite depleted, mentally, physically, everything. And so I think that before you make those decisions that are going to impact the rest of your life, because they do, just take a breath, right? Take a beat, take a moment to understand the implications and I'm a pretty analytic person, and I was like gathering all this information, but the one thing that I didn't really gather information about was this other option for where I could go with my quote unquote reconstruction. And partly that's because the seed was never planted in me to consider just going flat as something bigger, even if I can plant a seed for somebody that it might be an option for them. I think that it's good that there's resources out there available now that people can go to if they are considering that as an option. It doesn't mean that they have to do it, but it means that, they're armed with all of the information, not just pieces of the information that maybe one doctor decides to give to you, because that's not always all the information either. Doctors are people. They have opinions, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Advocate for yourself, and along with that, if you do decide to go flat, you are offering your services at Going Flat Fashions. Now, if someone wanted to contact you about, Going Flat Fashions, how can they do so?
Yeah, so my website is goingflatfashions.com. My website is goingflat.com. Goingflat.com. And my email is goingflatfashions@gmail.com. And I'm also on Instagram at goingflat, and I'm on Facebook at goingflat. And if people as well want more information, not only about my styling services, they can also look at the clothing that I have. I do have some accessories up there as well, like it's sort of a full fashion experience. And if people want information about resources related to flat closure, I can also send that information as well. And I'm happy to connect with people on any of those things. And then also just talk to others about my experience of how I got to going flat and, just sort of the ins and outs of that in more depth if people want to connect with me. I'm always open to having a conversation about any of that. So.
Great. Tracy, I wanted to thank you for coming onto the show, for enlightening us about just having options to go flat and to just break the stigma that you don't have to be afraid to go flat. You have options, and there are resources out there. So hopefully we will talk to you again soon. And I just want to thank you again for having the courage to come onto the show and tell us your story.
Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Take care. You have been listening to Boob Talk, and I'm your host, Cynthia Rogers. Tonight, our special guest was Tracy Stewart, breast cancer survivor and owner of Going Flat Fashions. We want to thank her for just sharing her courageous journey of how she decided to go flat. Now, we recognize that each survivor has their own special journey and makes their own choices, but we are all here to support and uplift each other. So until next time, God bless.
You have been listening to Boob Talk with your host, Cynthia Rogers. Follow us on all podcasting platforms and on Facebook at Boob Talk Podcast Group and Instagram at Cynthia L. Rogers Boob Talk Podcast. Remember, never give up hope.